Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held at City Hall on September 26, 2022 be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Knox and second by Councillor Meyer. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We have one delegation this evening. We have a labor market needs assessment. This is Urban Systems, and Jeff Palmer and PCRC, Mitch Tilk, are going to present to us this evening. So the floor is yours.
He needs to use the mic.
Right here? Okay. Maybe I have a few extra copies. I understand they might have been distributed. This is the report, not the presentation. But there's half a dozen copies, and there's more that are available. So if you're looking for a little light reading, it's a good report. I'm proud of it. I would have brought you more next time. Anyways, I understand I have 5 minutes.
Sorry, can we get you to actually speak into the mic so so the online viewers can hear you? Yeah.
I understand I have 5 minutes, and apparently these 4 are going to be difficulties. So I don't think much time. I appreciate your time. I know this is a very busy meeting, and everybody's busy. For those of you running the election, good luck, and for those of you moving on, thank you for your time served. I ran for council in Winnipeg a few years ago, and I know it's a thankless job, and I think the best that ever happened to me was finishing second. So I do appreciate your support, and I do want to say that it's nice to see that there's democracy is fragile, you might say sometimes. I work in lots of communities where not sometimes people aren't as vested in the future as they are in Portage. And it's refreshing to come to Portage because I like working in communities where people are excited about what's going on around them, and there's lots of discussion, there's lots of debate. I see the same people at different community meetings, and that's a good thing because you get to know people from different perspectives and different opinions, and that's one of the things that I like the best about my job. So I think this is maybe the 4th or 5th project I worked on in Portage in the last couple of years, and I look forward to many more. It's been nice building relationships with the community and the people in the community, and I hope it continues. So there goes my last minute. I'd like to thank you for participating. Now here, you're going to throw Google Chrome at me. So if I want to make it full screen, what's this going to do?
Did you want it bigger than that?
Well, no, we'll just scroll through this one. Great. So I apologize for not being able to visit back in September, but it didn't work out, and I have to come before the snow falls. So I wanted to present a quick overview of the labor market needs assessment. I was joking about the length of the report, but it's lengthy because it's comprehensive and it's full of good data. And I do encourage everyone, if you haven't had a chance to read it already, to have a look through it because it gives a good idea of some of the opportunities and challenges with regard to the labor market in Portage. If you thought I couldn't get this done in 5 minutes, you're wrong, because the running joke in my family is that my grandfather was an auctioneer, and I can talk faster than he can. So now when I ran for council 4 years ago, they put that in the paper, and my grandfather said, "I'm not an auctioneer." So I was busted on that one, but it made for a good headline. So the goals of the project were to I'm fine. I'm just checking with my peanut gallery here to make sure that they're keeping up with, because I had some extras in the back here. So part of the goal was to ensure that there's strategies to ensure there's a supply capacity of skilled workers that are sufficient to meet the needs of employers in the Portage la Prairie market, and to ensure that youth, immigrants, and Indigenous people in particular are equipped with the necessary skills and training that allow them to fully participate in the labor market. So make sure that there's a connection between the jobs that are available, because we know that there are jobs, and that there's a bit of a shortage in the labor market, and try and fit people who have the skills or need skills to those jobs. Some of the key findings with regard to youth. So some of the findings overlap a bit, and some of them are specific to each of the 3 groups that we just mentioned. So there's a culture of work. I say to the kids in my office that, you don't know what it's like to work when I grew up. That's, I think, true to a certain extent. There is a little bit of a difference, thank you, regarding the culture of work today. There's different expectations with youth. And I know that my kids have different expectations than what I had when I was 10 years old delivering papers and walking around with $1,000 in my pocket. Things are different. Not $1,000 for me, $1,000 for the Winnipeg Free Press. That's another story. There's often limited parental support for work. We don't want you to work on the weekends. We want to go to the cottage. Your job can't get in the way of our lifestyle. So things are different. There's fewer youth available to work these days. There's a lack of relevant work experience, and that goes hand in hand with the nature of the issue. Insufficient skills and training for jobs. We hear that from employers and youth who are looking for work, that they're not ready for work, whether they don't understand the expectations or they don't have the skills available for the job. And the youth are not seen as having a strong drive for work or work ethic. I'm not sure if that's truth or perception. I think my parents thought the same thing about me when I was a kid. So maybe it's just kind of understanding the different generations and some of the challenges a little bit better. That's what we found for youth. For immigrants, we did find that immigrants experience ongoing racism and microaggressions that we can't ignore or sweep under the rug. There's also experience and challenges in having their credentials recognized. A lot of people have tons of skills for the job they're doing and then some, but their skills aren't recognized. Their credentials aren't recognized by the institution. That's a problem all across the country. Some people reported going to Ontario to have their skills recognized, their credentials recognized, and then coming back to Manitoba. So we need to do better. We've done a really good job bringing immigrants to Canada, to Manitoba in particular, I should say, but we can't always keep them because some of the structures don't keep up. So that's something that we all have to work towards. There's a local lack of job references, a lack of social and professional networks. We all know that how many of us get jobs out of the newspaper or out of a traditional advertisement? Many don't. You get them through your networks. And one thing that's really important is that to appreciate that immigrants don't have the same networks that established, people who are established in Portage might have. So how do we build these networks within immigrant communities and between different communities in Portage la Prairie? It's important. Obtaining a driver's license, we often take for granted, but it can be a complicated process and necessary for work for many people. There's challenges with English examinations. And again, it's difficult to meet people and build relationships. That's important for many reasons. People want to be part of their community. They want to be part of their own community. They want to be part of larger immigrant communities, and we want them to stay. We want them to be comfortable here. So it requires extra effort on the part of everyone to make sure that people feel comfortable. But in the long run, that's where it becomes important to keeping employees in Portage. A satisfaction with the community, a familiarity. And the first step is to acknowledge that there's challenges. And that's what we've done here. And then we can start to talk about some of the solutions. With regard to Indigenous people, also experiencing overt racism and microaggressions, lack of transportation options from nearby First Nations was referenced often. A lack of confidence in their skills. A lot of people have a lot of experience, traditional, non-traditional experience, a lot of life skills, but they don't feel comfortable with the skills because their job or employment history may not be as stable or traditional as they might expect. There can be limited training and educational opportunities in First Nations, and it can be difficult to meet people in Portage outside of your community. I should mention that lots of the things that we're kind of attributing to one of the three communities, we've heard throughout many communities. It's just a matter, how often we heard it. That's kind of why we chose the highlights. We did hear that intergenerational trauma has impacted the entire community. That's something that we appreciate and need to address on an ongoing basis. And there's a struggle to balance competing family and work obligations. And I was joking about that earlier in my own situation where I think I had to leave a job so that we could go on a family holiday. But you hear that in particular with regard to Indigenous people. We heard that quite often, more so than in other communities. So some of the general issues, we were asked to discuss the impact of COVID. And when we were doing the study about a year ago, we were in the full COVID experience. And it's changed since then. So some of the findings you have to take with a grain of salt. But it has, at the time it had a negative impact on employment in the community. I would say now it's had a different kind of effect. There's a labor shortage throughout the world, it seems. People are not moving between communities. More people are working, but in different sectors. So the hospitality sector in particular has never recovered, but more people are working. So what are they doing these days? They found higher value jobs, but the entry-level jobs that people often take when they're trying to build their skills or they're just arriving in Portage, those jobs, those people, they're not traveling, they're not moving around the world, they're not moving to Portage to take those jobs, so there is a shortage. And that's not unique to Portage la Prairie at all. The well-paying jobs aren't advertised, there's sexism in the workplace, and there's general obstacles in the job search. And as well, many jobs are considered to be undesirable. So any employer out there will know that they're doing half the work themselves because they can't find staff in their office. So people will not take work for different reasons, but it's important to understand a little bit in more detail what those reasons are. And the report goes into that in a little bit further detail. We did hear that the cost of living is high relative to the salary. The lack of public transit access is a challenge with regard to employment opportunities. We've heard that in a number of studies, that the jobs are in one place and the people are in another. And if you don't have a driver's license, if you're new to Canada, it's difficult to access those jobs. We heard that there are people who are, that there's companies that set up shuttles from Winnipeg, from Brandon, to bring employers in, but they don't bring in employees, from Portage la Prairie, from within the community. So we need to work on that a little bit in a little bit more detail. Taxi service was not generally described as being a positive experience. Lack of regional transportation. It all goes back to the transportation issue in very to a great degree. Affordable housing is in short supply. Daycare is an issue. It's limited and expensive, and when you have people working on shift work in particular, that's an extra complication, especially if your shift is changing. How do you balance the needs of your family against the needs with your employer? And daycare is hard enough to find at the best of times, but when you're dealing with changing shifts, it becomes next to impossible. There are perceptions that the community is unsafe, and that there's divisions in terms of race, wealth, and culture, and that Portage doesn't offer the services needed to retain employees over the long term. So these are all things to appreciate and work towards. They're not necessarily related to labor market issues in particular, but how can we make Portage a more welcoming community, a more comfortable community for everyone, for new Canadians, for immigrants, for youth, for Indigenous people, for everyone in our community to feel part of the community, feel comfortable, and feel that there's opportunities and reasons for them to stay. And, you know, I don't want to overemphasize the negative aspects of the report, because every community is dealing with those in some respect or another. So it's good to acknowledge them. That's the first step in starting to address solutions and work together to have better outcomes. So some of the recommendations: building connections, improving communication, and enhance relationships between service organizations. There's lots of good people doing good work in the community. There's good communication, but we heard that it could be better on a number of occasions. A mentorship program, building those one-on-one relationships between people within particular communities and between different communities. We heard about job fairs and career fairs within immigrant communities, but also between immigrant and business communities. So building relationships at all levels and having that personal connection where one person looks out for you and kind of takes you under their wing and helps build those relationships that are so hard to build if you're moving into a new community. We also heard that improved physical connections will lead to improved social and economic connections. So physical connections in terms of transportation, transit, cycling, biking, it's all about getting around. It's getting around efficiently and safely is so important in your economy. It's not always about driving from one place to another. It can be, but it's about keeping your options open, having as many options for people so that nobody's reliant on one particular type of transportation. Enhancing supports for employers. We interviewed dozens of employers, and you can tell some of the larger corporations who have HR experience that goes beyond benefit administration. Some of the larger companies, they appreciate that turnover is an issue. They understand some of the issues facing employers or employees, I should say, and how to keep them there for the long term. It's not always just offering an extra dollar here and there. It's about creating an environment where there's opportunities to grow, to fulfill yourself, to manage your work-life balance. And many times smaller employers don't have to deal with those issues. So mentorship can work within the business community as well, between HR groups. We saw some communities that have HR support, HR fairs, and HR managers from different organizations get together and they talk about these issues. It's all about communication and sharing knowledge between organizations. That was the second point there, considering a local network of HR professionals for support. The third point, employers require assistance in verifying foreign credentials, recruiting qualified immigrants, training grants, and information on legal working requirements for immigrants. We worked in a community in northwestern Ontario where their economic development officer basically spent all his time trying to place employees with employers. And there was a demand on both parts. I joke that when I used to do land development for Center Venture for the city of Winnipeg, I would spend a lot of my time doing the work that developers didn't want to do. It didn't pay very well, but it was important. And this this economic development advisor was doing the same sort of thing. They were doing a lot of the heavy lifting that is time consuming that the company didn't want to do, but it was necessary for the company's benefit. And it's necessary for the community's benefit. So that's maybe one way that your economic development agency can help provide additional services to employers.
Jeff, I'll give you the 1 minute warning to sum up so we can open up for questions from council.
Sure, thank you. Just to conclude, I think I'm on, I've got 4 more slides. But creating a more welcoming workplace, a more welcoming community, I think, I've hinted at that already about all the opportunities there. Helping to navigate the process, promoting trades as a viable career path, developing workplace inclusion strategies, networking opportunities, inclusion strategies for the general public, not just within the business community, and training and awareness for newcomers with regard to Indigenous issues and reconciliation issues. All important. Human resource policies. Criminal records often result in automatic disqualification, and maybe that doesn't need to be the case necessarily. Flexible workplace arrangements, including part-time and flex work. That is so critical, especially for women, especially for people responsible for families, and that's just the reality. Sponsored in-house daycare and transportation and housing supports. Employers need to be a little bit more active on that front and not just expect government to take care of that for them. And the transportation options, the lack of those are important. So professional development and training opportunities. There's a number of opportunities there that we've identified in elder and residents, job fairs on First Nations, enhanced co-op internship and volunteer opportunities. They all go into more detail in the report. These are just kind of the highlights. So that was pretty fast even for me. I apologize for that, but there was a lot of information to cover in a short amount of time. I know we only had a few minutes at today's presentation, but I'm happy to talk about the issues anytime, one-on-one, or to any of the organizations in the community. Just let Mitch know and we can arrange it. So happy to take any questions that you have right now, though.
Okay. Any questions from council? Councillor Knox?
Thanks, Jeff, for all the information. I'm just curious, you mentioned that you met with a number of employers, but you also mentioned COVID being an issue. So how'd you gather your data from the youth and immigrants, et cetera?
We did a combination. I'm trying to remember exactly where we were COVID-wise. Most of the interviews with employers were one-on-one Teams and Zoom and phone calls. With the youth, in particular, it was surveys that were sent out through the school. And we had some focus groups with new Canadians and Indigenous people in person. It was possible at the time. They weren't particularly well attended, to be honest. They were a little less effective than we'd hoped. That's why we always build a number of different strategies into any engagement exercise, because nothing ever goes as well as you expect. So on the whole, I was happy with the number of people who are participated, and sort of the strategy is to keep asking the questions until you start getting the same answer over and over again, and that's kind of what we did. So it didn't quite go exactly as planned. We're starting to hear a little bit about engagement fatigue, and honestly, people were starting to get tired of us. I think everybody, that was kind of at the worst, middle of the winter when COVID was at its worst, and everybody was grouchy, myself included. But I am happy with the quality of the research overall, particularly with regard to business people. I'd have to check my notes exactly, but I think it was around 50, and that's quite representative of the community, I would say.
Great, thank you.
Other questions from council?
Yes, thank you,
Councillor
Your
Meyer?
Worship. All right, thank you, Your Worship, and Jeff and PCRC. Thank you so much. I actually am looking forward to reviewing the actual report in its entirety. The only question I have is just in regards to backing on to Councillor Knox's comments, just in relationship to the business owners that you had the conversation with, and you referred to it in some of the things that we can do. When they talk about establishing more flexible workplace arrangements, part-time flex hours, hybrid arrangements, provide subsidized sponsor in-house daycare, were these recommendations from the employers and they are prepared to do those types of things, or was that kind of coming from the employee perspective?
Almost neither, to be honest. Those were best practices that we found worked in other communities. They weren't generally suggested by employers. some of the larger employees that I would say had more sophisticated HR departments did do a couple of those things and mentioned a few of them. Rarely would employees mention it because I think, to be honest, they just weren't aware of some of the opportunities or some of the things that happen in other communities. So it was a bit of an education process for all of us, including myself, when we researched the case studies. We looked at a dozen communities and projects outside of Portage la Prairie and outside of Manitoba to see what other communities are doing, and we got those tips from them. So they were all Canadian examples, but not necessarily within Manitoba.
Super. And if I could just add one more thing to that, is there data available that kind of gives some perspective on the number and the types of employers that may offer these types of subsidies? Obviously, the data may be somewhere.
There should be a summary of the case studies that would give you a bit of the data. To what degree, I would have to check. It's all out there. It's all changing very quickly. I would say anything that's been written in the last 2 or 3 years is not relevant anymore. But I think what you're asking for should be in the report, but it might, I might have to go back and check my notes on that one, to be honest.
Okay, I'll certainly review it. And listen, thank you for the insurmountable amount of work that you've put into this. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. I had one question for you, Jeff. You mentioned transportation. You mentioned at least one large employer is running a bus out of Winnipeg, bring workers out, and we knew about that, and we talked to them about that, and so they started their hiring in Portage and the area. They did the engagement. They hired as many people as they could find that were qualified, but then there was still a gap, and that's when they went outside the area and hired the skills they were looking for in Winnipeg. So it wasn't, I don't know if that was discussed or like there was a comment there about some large employers will run a bus from Winnipeg but not from Portage. Well, the reason would be the skills aren't in, they've already hired those people. That's my understanding. Mm-hmm. Any clarification on that?
I think when I was speaking quickly, I probably didn't cover all the different employers. And I should mention that those were comments that we heard as well. So you have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt. My understanding was that, my understanding is your understanding, is that there was it's tough because I'm trying to speak in generalities without identifying particular employers because the survey was anonymous. But what we did hear and what some employers discussed was that at different times they will offer shuttles to different employees depending on it, but that there was not necessarily a guaranteed reliable service between Portage and the business park. Different employers might have different setups, might be kind of specific to different times of the year, different operations, but on an ongoing basis, there wasn't consistent, reliable service from Portage proper to the business park. So, I shouldn't go into too much more detail than that, but I can appreciate that, I didn't mean to imply that one particular employer ignored Portage and turned to Brennan and Winnipeg. It's definitely a matter of supplementing the local support, the local resource with labor from outside. But at the same time, we did hear over and over and over again that there are transportation challenges and maybe that's part of it too, is maybe it's a skills shortage for one particular employer, maybe it's an access or juggling home responsibilities, maybe that's the issue for other. I couldn't say, but we didn't just hear it once, we did hear it quite consistently.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for coming out and presenting this evening. Very interesting to drill down into this report.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, and I wanted to thank everyone again. I see a lot of faces at the table that help facilitate the report and coordinate stakeholder interviews and community focus groups and that sort of thing. So we couldn't do the report without a lot of community support, and it's always appreciated when we come to Portage. So thanks again.
Thank you. We have a number of public hearings this evening. We're going to open the public hearing. This is a request for variation for PC 56-22. This is for Manitoba Hydro Electric Board at 50 14th Street Northeast. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Hearing for Manitoba Hydro Electric Board. Anyone here to speak to the hearing? Okay, I need a motion to close the public hearing, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Be it resolved, and I so move, that the public hearing for variation PC 56-22, Manitoba Hydroelectric Board at 50 14th Street Northeast, now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and second by Councillor Knox. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Okay, Council, in front of you, you're going to see the report. Attached to it, of course, are the site plan and the sketch that shows you the area and the detail in discussion. So, of course, the request comes from the Manitoba Hydroelectric Board, and the issue is to vary the side yard requirement when on a corner lot of 9.1 meters, and that's to be reduced down to 2.6 meters. So the background is that the Manitoba Hydroelectric Board is applying for the variation order to vary the side yard requirement to what I just mentioned. They want to construct an addition to the existing garage. For your information, the building is in a C3 Avenue commercial zone. The application has been circulated to various departments, and there have been no concerns. Public notices have been sent out to all property owners with a 100-meter radius, and as you can see, there have been no objections. So with that said, it's the administrative recommendation, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Manitoba Hydroelectric Board to vary the side yard requirement when on a corner lot of 9.1 meters to be reduced to 2.6 meters at the property known as 50 14th Street Northeast, which is legally described as Parish Lot 69 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Knox. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We'll open the public hearing for conditional use PC 57-22. This is for FT3 Architecture, Landscape, Interior Design at 2 River Road. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Could you state your name for the record, sir?
My name is Gerald Peters. I'm with FT3 Architecture, Landscape, Interior Design. I do not have a presentation this evening, but I am available for questions. I'm also here with representatives from Southern Health and Shared Health.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? Okay, thank you, sir. Need a motion to close the public hearing?
Be it resolved, and I so move, that the public hearing for conditional use, PC 57-22, for FT3 Architecture Landscape Interior Design at 2 River Road now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Knox. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Okay, and council, in front of you as well, you're going to see to the Planning and Economic Development Committee, request for conditional use, as we discussed, FT3 Architecture, Landscape, Interior Design. So the issue is to allow for a Health Institute Hospital in an OR, which is known as Open Space Recreational Zone. And as always, our alternatives to approve the conditional use as it's been presented, to approve the conditional use application with any conditions, or of course to deny the conditional use application. There for your reference is the site plan, which gives you exactly the area of the parcel of land that we're talking about, and that's on Schedule A. And there's also a road sketch, and it puts it into perspective where it is in the city. Get back to that. So the background, as we previously discussed, is that FT3 Architectural Landscape Interior Design, applying for conditional use to allow for the Health Institute Hospital in an OR or open space recreational zone. The application was fully circulated to the various city departments. There have been no concerns, and public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius, and there have been no objections. It's the administrative recommendation, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the conditional use application of FT3 Architecture Landscape Interior Design to allow for a Health Institute Hospital in an OR open space recreational zone at the property 2 River Road, which is legally described as Parish Lot 70 in the parish of Portage la Prairie.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Knox. Any questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Knox?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment. As you can imagine, we get a lot of questions as to where this process is, and I'm very happy to approve this one piece of it so that we're moving forward toward our new hospital. So, thank you.
Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I too just want to echo Councillor Knox's comments. Pretty exciting when you start to see the actual site plan of possibly where the new hospital is going. So it's something that I will certainly support this recommendation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. So our next public hearing, we'll open the public hearing. This is a request for variation, PC 58-22. This is for Niagara at 39 Chatham Bay. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? I'll ask the proponent to speak first and then an opponent. Would you state your name for the record, ma'am?
I'm Sunit Nagra. I'm the legal owner and reside in 39 Chatham Bay, so I'm here to answer any questions anyone may have.
Did council have any questions for the proponent? That's all for now. Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak to the public hearing?
I had submitted a letter to be read.
We'll have that letter read into the record right now.
My name is Noreen Brownlee, and I live at 37 Chatham Bay. My front lawn is adjacent to Dr. Sunit Nagra's driveway. It really irritates me that we need to spend our evening here and that taxpayers' money is being wasted to have the Honourable Mayor Ferris and City Councillors discussing the widening of a driveway which was done without approval. I arrived home from work on September 2nd, the Friday before the Labor Day weekend, to find that a large strip of lawn that adjoins our properties had been dug up with footings and rebar installed. Further surprised to find on September 6th, the day following the Labor Day weekend, when I got home from work, that concrete had already been poured. Since then, I have learned that this work was completed without an application for a permit, hence no approval from the city. It has been my experience that when using a reputable contractor, the contractor either knows what the bylaws state or makes a point of learning them prior to commencing with any work. If you drive around the subdivision, you will notice that all the property lines are set up the same way. Each property has a strip of unpaved land down the side of their property. When the subdivision was planned and property lines were set, I am sure this strip of unpaved property was planned that way for a reason. I would think that it had much to do with drainage. Prior to this adjustment being made, the lawn and driveway were landscaped to be at a level height. Now there is an unsightly wall of concrete, which is really quite an eyesore. There are no other properties in the neighborhood which have had the lawn removed and replaced with concrete, changing the aesthetics of the neighborhood. This raises concerns regarding the drainage onto my property. Since putting in the concrete extension, the downspout from the eaves trough has been turned to allow roof runoff to flow from the driveway. I question, when there is snow on the ground, where will the snow be shoveled to clear the driveway? Will it be moved to my lawn? I am concerned about where all this added water is going to go and what effects it may have on my property. What guarantees do I have that all this waterlogged lawn won't affect my home? I certainly don't feel this is my responsibility or something that I should have to worry about. I fully understand that this is Dr. Nagra's property, but from a visual standpoint, it makes my property look much smaller than all the others in the surrounding neighborhood. If I decide to sell my property, it could be a hindrance to me and would very likely reduce my market value. If this application is approved after the work has been completed, it would set a precedent which would allow others in the neighborhood to do the same. I can't imagine the drainage problems that it could cause. It also sends a message to the citizens of Portage that there is no need to apply for permits. Everyone is above the law, and it is absolutely fine to do whatever you want. When things like this are allowed to happen, it tarnishes the appearance of the city and property values decrease. I don't think that any of us want that to happen. In closing, I ask that this property change is not approved and it is returned to its prior state.
Thank you. Did you wish to address council?
No, I have nothing further to say, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Did council have any questions? Okay. The proponent gets a chance to speak again if you want to respond to the letter or the concerns raised.
In terms of the driveway expansion, it was done by Vertex Construction. There was a verbal approval from the city planner, nothing in writing, unfortunately. So I was told after the fact that it was flagged red after a complaint. In terms of-
Sorry, ma'am, I can't quite hear you. Could you speak up a little bit?
I hired Vertex Construction to do the driveway expansion, asked them if there's any permits needed. I was told verbally they had talked to a city planner and everything was good to go. I was away on holidays when the digging up was done and the concrete was poured. In terms of the topsoil, I did not touch it further after the complaint in terms of further leveling and improving the imbalance. In terms of the drainage, the driveway is still 6 inches from my property line, so that grass is still present at the edge of my driveway on my property. The drain spout has been changed in the direction of the driveway, so it will not run into the yard for 37 Cadam Bay. Also, the expansion is to park a trailer, so no snow will be shoveled into the yard. It'll be shoveled into my own yard. It will be blocking the access for me to shovel into the other yard.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions from council? Councillor Knox?
Can I ask questions to the planning now?
Yeah, if you would like to go through the chair, a question of the planning district, sure.
Through your worship to planning, can you speak on the comments about verbal approval to Vertex?
I know that Vertex had contacted the planning district. However, I'm not exactly sure everything that was said. I know that they were told to only go so far, and Vertex went over what they were told to go to.
Is it for the width? Because the variation application is from 6 meters to 8.7 meters. Standard driveways on that street are already 7 meters across the street, every other household, which is already over the limits as well.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
On all of Cadam Bay and Carlisle Bay, if 6 meters is the allowance for driveways to touch the curb onto city property, they are all 7 meters in width. So I was already over the limit, as are all the other houses on my street.
Thank you.
Could the planning district just clarify what width was specified to Vertex Construction?
Unfortunately, I'd have to get back to you on that, as I'd need to talk to one of my building inspectors.
Other questions from council?
My question is, I just don't feel we have enough, I don't have enough information tonight to make a decision on this when I'm hearing things from planning that I don't know. Can we?
Can I make one more comment? In terms of the width, they were never given any width restrictions, is my understanding, as long as it stayed on my property width. I think the concern the builder told me is the 60 centimeters from the proximal to the curb. It's not the actual width expansion, because I was told as long as you're on your property line, you can go within your property line. It's the 60 to 80 centimeters that are away from the curb, touching the curb. It's a 60 centimeter by 4 foot, not a 4 foot, sorry, 60 centimeters by 3 foot slab. That, I guess, would be an eyesore. I can cut that piece out if you'd like.
Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I guess this would be a question for planning. Is there any measurements of where it has to be against the neighboring property line? So, Your Worship? I'm sorry, that would be a question for, I'm not sure who to ask, Your Worship.
I think we'd direct the question to operations.
to operations? Okay, so there is a bylaw that states the,
Yes, whenever someone wants to widen their driveway or put in a new driveway, they're required to get a curb cut permit from operations, which wasn't done in this case. In the bylaw, the maximum width is 6 meters, though, as Mrs. Niagara had said, that there are many driveways that are 7 meters. And there has been variations to go wider at times as well.
okay, sorry, and what about to the neighboring property line? Can it abut the neighboring property line?
So you can pave up to your property line, but you are not allowed to change the grades.
Okay. Sorry, just one further question to that, Your Worship. And I do read in the report to council that the grade has changed
Yes, it has.
significantly.
Yeah, quite significantly.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Now, Councillor Knox, you were going to recommend that more information be brought forward?
If I may, Your Worship, through yourself to Councillor Knox. So we are in a public hearing right now. The hearing is on the evidence brought forward by the proponent and any opponents. I would suggest that we close the hearing, and then council could make statements if they'd like to defer the decision to another evening. But in a public hearing, that wouldn't take place.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, entertain a motion to close the public hearing at this time.
Thank you, Your Worship. Be it resolved, and I so move that the public hearing for variation PC 58-22 for Niagara at 39 Chatham Bay now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Knox. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And if I can, maybe, Your Worship, just for clarity, back to, through you to our city manager, if this we need to read the report to council first?
That would be through Your Worship to Councillor Meyer. That would be your decision. If you would like to just simply defer to another meeting, you would have to specify the date in your motion, or you could read the report, and then before you read out the administrative recommendation, you could also make your motion to defer.
I guess I would feel comfortable with the motion to defer this report to council until we have the appropriate information that we require from planning.
So 2 weeks from today's.
October the 24th of 2022. I trust that would give planning enough time to get the appropriate information.
We'll just need a seconder for that motion, Your Worship.
Can we just read through the motion again? Okay, so your motion was resolved that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie defer this matter until the next meeting of council, October 24th.
To the October 24th, 2022 meeting, for awaiting further information from the planning district.
And Councillor Knox, you're seconding the motion? Any questions or comments on the motion?
Your Worship, if I could make a comment for the benefit of Ms. Anderson in the planning district, could we clarify the questions that is being asked for us to respond to from administration?
Yeah, so for the information that should be included is, first of all, the information you were asking for, Councillor Knox from planning district, was on the distance that was advised?
Was on I want verbal agreements with the contractor, if any were given. And I guess also in the planning, is there a remedy for this without, is there options for distance and grading that can be changed without completely changing the project?
The other information, I'd ask operations to include the information on the requirement for a curb cut so that all of council has that information also. Okay, questions have been called. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. So that matter will come back to council 2 weeks from last night on Monday, October 24th. We'll move right into committee. First up is Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee. Councillor Knox for Councillor Buds this evening.
Thank you, Worship. Nothing from your Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee this evening.
Thank you. And City Planning and Economic Development Committee, Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. City Planning Economic Development Committee has nothing to report at this time, but there is some old business later on in the agenda.
Thank you. And Community Service Committee, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Worship. Nothing from Community Services in this portion of the meeting.
Thank you. And Waterworks Committee, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Worship. Nothing from your Waterworks Committee this evening.
Thank you. And Transportation Committee, Councillor Meyer for Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Transportation Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. And finally, Public Safety Committee, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing from your Public Safety Committee this evening.
Thank you. We have no deferred business this evening. We have a number of items of new business. First item is first reading of bylaw 22-8743. This is for Romano. This is a road closure and sale of pathway beside 229 Caledonia. Excuse me. And this is Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee. Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have a pathway closure and sale for 229 Caledonia in front of us. So the issue is to consider the closure and sale of portion of the pathway between 229 and 219 Caledonia. Valerie and Elena Romano have expressed an interest in purchasing a portion of the 30 by 120 foot public walkway adjacent to their property at 229 Caledonia Street. The area between 229 and 219 is legally defined as a public walkway and will need to be closed and subdivided to sell a portion of it. City Council will need to pass a road closing bylaw and circulate it to various government agencies and utilities for review and feedback, hold a public hearing, and obtain approval from the Minister in Municipal Relations to close and sell it. This walkway is used by the city to access the larger green space to the north of the property, and we would need to keep 12 feet for mower and truck access. This leaves 18 feet that could be closed and sold. There is no other access to the green space behind the properties, which the city maintains as a mowed field. There will be a number of upfront costs related to completing the closure and sale, such as legal fees, zoning amendment fees, and survey costs that would be the responsibility of the purchaser to pay. These upfront costs are estimated to be in the $9,000 range and would be in addition to the purchase price. It is important to note that at any time during this process, the province or land titles could recommend that the closure and sale not be approved, and any money spent up to that point would be non-refundable. As per city policy ADM-AN-sale of public lanes and undevelopable areas, the pathway could be sold at a rate of 0.45 cents per square foot plus all costs in accordance with the Municipal Act, if not required for city use. The size of the area the Romanos would like to purchase is 18 feet by 120 feet, or 2,160 square feet. The purchase price based on this policy would be $972. I so move in the administrative recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie give first reading to bylaw 22-8743, a bylaw to close all that portion of the footpath as described in said bylaw, and authorize its sale for the sum of $972 plus all costs associated with the closing to Valerie and Elena Romano.
Moved by Councillor Knox and seconded by Councillor Meyer. Questions or comments on the motion? So just so I'm clear on it, so the city will continue to own 12 feet wide to use that for accessing equipment in that green area, and that can also be used by the public. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Next item of new business is John Q. Public, Child Care Partnership MOU Agreement. This is Community Service Committee. Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am very pleased to bring this memorandum of understanding to the table with for a joint child care facility. The issue is to pursue an opportunity for a capital-funded, jointly run childcare facility with the rural municipality of Portage. The province of Manitoba is providing a capital funding grant to develop new childcare spaces in new childcare centers with licensed and approved operators. City administration has been in discussions with the rural municipality of Portage la Prairie about working in partnership with John Q. Public Pilot Project, a collaborative replicable process to support and share community capacity in communities in Manitoba to build important community infrastructure. More information will be released at the time the province makes their funding announcement. A resolution of council is required to move forward. I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the terms outlined in a memorandum of understanding with the RM to provide 2 acres of land for the purpose of operating a child care center, to work with the RM in the development of said land, and to authorize the city manager to work with the RM, John Q. Public, JQ Build, and the province of Manitoba to negotiate a financial assistance agreement to be brought to council approval.
Moved by Councillor Knox and seconded by Councillor Meyer. Comments or questions on the motion? Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I just want to say how much or how good I feel in supporting this recommendation at this point. In fact, it's kind of funny. I think the labor needs assessment did indicate that there was a child care issue problem within Portage la Prairie, and I believe that this goes a long way to resolving that. So from my table or from my chair, I certainly support this at this point in time 100%. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Knox?
Just a comment too. I agree with Councillor Meyer too, and also just to maybe make a comment that this is another regional approach with a partnership with the RM that I think we can be proud of as a council, that we can continue to make strides together in our community, and childcare is definitely a need.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Next item of new business is the Rotary Club naming rights of a skateboard park at Simplot Central Park, and this is Community Service Committee again. Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's full of good news tonight, so I'm happy. Anyway, tonight we have the issue to approve a naming rights agreement with the Rotary Club of Portage la Prairie for the proposed skateboard park located in Simplot Central Park. The Rotary Club of Portage la Prairie has approached the city with an offer of funds in exchange for naming rights to the proposed skateboard park to be located in Simplot Central Park. An agreement has been drafted with the following highlights. Effective upon the commencement of construction, the name of the park shall become the Portage Rotary Skateboard Park, or a variation thereof, for a 25-year term. The city shall erect and bear all costs for signage, which is to be approved by the Rotary Club. After installation, the Rotary Club shall be responsible for any subsequent changes to signage at their request. The city shall be responsible for maintenance of the signage as well as maintenance of the park to a standard that promotes the values of the Rotary Club. The Rotary Club shall pay the sum of $50,000 to the city upon commencement of construction, or earlier based on an agreement between these two parties. The initial signage installation will be paid for with the funds received from the Rotary Club. The full agreement is attached for review. I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the naming rights agreement with the Rotary Club of Portage la Prairie for the skateboard park in Simplot Central Park for the sum of $50,000.
Moved by Councillor Knox and seconded by Councillor Meyer. Questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just before moving forward, I just do want to state for the record that I am a member of the Rotary Club and am involved in this project. I declare no conflict of interest. There is no pecuniary value that I would ever receive from it. And I just wanted to let that be aware that any decisions I make on this will be strictly from my chair from my chair here around the council table. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Knox.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment on number 3 where it said that the city will maintain the park to a standard that promotes the values of the Rotary Club. I've been thinking about that's a pretty high standard if you've seen the duck pond this summer. So it will be a nice park. Thank you.
Other questions or comments on the motion? I have a couple comments. I'm not a Rotarian, but if I was, I'd be very proud this evening to be a member of the Rotary Club. This park was a dream for a lot of residents of Portage going back probably at least 10 years ago. And there's been a tremendous amount of work and fundraising done. A lot of progress has been done. We've had a lot of citizens work at a grassroots level over the last 10 years on this, and we've had organizations and sponsors like our local industry and of course the Rotary Club step up in a big way and move this along that road, so it's much closer to being a reality today. So it really is heartening to see after all this time the progress that has been made on this particular project in our community. So yeah, well done for all those involved. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. So that concludes our new business this evening. We're going to move into old business. First item of old business is the second and third reading of bylaw 22-8740. This is for rezoning of PC 4822. This is for the Portage la Prairie Community Revitalization Corporation. This is for PCRC in short. Lots 1 and 2, Block 1, Plan 27884. And this is City Planning and Economic Development. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. And as a result that it is second and third reading, I will not review the entire report to council as we have revisited it when we passed the first reading. So, but you will see there, of course, the sketch and the Schedule A, of course, that shows the area, and this reverts back to the land for PCRC for housing. Come on. There we go. So the issue, of course, I'll just summarize it, will be rezone the property from R1 residential single family zone to R3 residential multiple family zone. Shows the alternatives of what we need to do in regards to getting it to the second reading. The background, of course, the question, property in questions are the lots 1 and 2, Block 1, Plan 27884, as identified in the schedule. The plan development, the Portage la Prairie Development Plan policy states the following, which we reviewed the last time as well and fit within that area. As I mentioned previously, the application has been circulated to the various city departments. There have been no concerns being expressed. Our role was the application has been advertised in the Daily Graphic for 2 consecutive weeks, circulated to the province, and public notices have been sent out to all owners of property within a 100-meter radius of the proposed development as per Section 168 of the Planning Act. The first reading was August the 8th of 2022, and that started the process. As of this writing, we have not received any written objections to the proposed rezoning scheme, and the documents were, of course, circulated to provincial departments and agencies, and there were no objections. Provincial Planning also recommended approval of zoning bylaw amendment number 22-8740. So with that said, it's the administrative recommendation, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the application to rezone the land legally described as lots 1 and 2, Block 1, Plan 27884, Parish of Portage la Prairie from R1, residential single family zone to R3, residential multiple family zone, and that bylaw number 22-8740 be read a second time.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and second by Councillor Knox. Now, John, I saw your hand go up.
I don't have an objection. We're neighbors of that. So we just received a thing in the mail saying that there was a hearing tonight.
Okay.
So don't have any objections because I don't really know enough about it to object. So I came tonight hoping that maybe we would discuss what a multifamily dwelling would look like in my, right behind my house. Because I didn't know there was a first or a second reading. This is kind of the first. I did see it in the paper that something was sold to, somebody for $1 behind our neighborhood. And then I was, keeping my eye out for when something else would come up about it. And this is what I'm here to learn about tonight. So don't know if I need to object or not. Do have some questions, and I was hoping that there'd be some information shared tonight about it, maybe.
Your worship, so that I'm not aware that
Thank
this was, if I may, it's a public hearing, but there would be an opportunity definitely if the executive director PCRC could speak about their plans for the property. I think that would be beneficial for council and for the members of public here if they're prepared to do that.
Sure, I can definitely speak a little bit to it. So by no means is it a huge apartment building or anything like that. We're planning on having 5 units.
Sorry, yeah, we seem to be getting interference here, Mike. Would you mind going to the main mic or?
Better?
Yes.
Okay. So we are planning on having 5 affordable housing units, 2 1-bedrooms, a 2 bedrooms, and then a 3-bedroom. So we want to rezone those lots to make this affordable housing unit onto 2 lots. Do you have any specific questions about the build?
One thing is that currently, and for the history of Portage la Prairie, that's been a swamp in that area. Our neighbor who was 96 years old told us he used to be able to see straight through to MDC when it was being built, and it's always been a swamp, and we certainly experienced a swamp there this year. So we were concerned about if something was raised there. I mean, currently there's a gravel road there and a little ditch, but no adequate water drainage built in. So I assume that would maybe be built as part of the infrastructure into this. But we were hoping that it wouldn't all kind of come into our yards, or where would this swamp go? Or, I mean, they'll build this place up probably, and then, right, we're a little concerned about that.
So we do have a contractor who will be doing the build, and we expect that to all be taken care of, obviously, and that it would be properly drained.
When I was just investigating that it was sold for $1, I thought, who's this sold to? And then I thought, oh, maybe to Habitat. And that's what I was excited about, the idea for Habitat, and thought, oh, there'll be some really good homeowners right around us. I'm a little bit nervous about who would be moving into this place, you know, looking across to the pea plant and to industrial section on a gravel road, that it would be perhaps some people that may
Councillor Knox, you had,
not improve the neighborhood.
Yeah, so I could probably speak to that. This was a part of the funding that came for affordable housing to the city of Portage, and we worked with PCRC as well as Habitat for Humanity for that funding, and that's where this comes from, but with the same kind of PCRC having the same plans and ideas as a Habitat would, right? So that they'd be very careful as to who they were working with and providing housing for. That it's definitely, I don't know exactly who PCRC would be having manage the properties, but with the same sort of idea as Habitat. I get your concern there for sure. Yeah.
and whoever the contractor is will be working with the planning district and operations, and those standards for drainage and all that kind of thing is set by a planning district and operations. So it isn't left up to the individual contractor.
Okay, thank you. We've lived in this place for 23 years, and just all of a sudden there's going to be a big change to it, so just wanted to learn a little bit more tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. Has there been the preliminary drawings done for the residences there yet, or are we not at that stage?
No, we're not at that stage yet.
Following kind of an idea of an apartment building or townhouse kind of units or anything else?
Well, I mean, so the plan is to have 5 units. So by all means, we expect it to not be like more than 3 stories. I don't have a ton of information.
And then to allow for parking as well, right? 'Cause these lots are fairly small too, so I was just a little curious as to that, but yeah, maybe you don't know that yet.
Yeah, as I said previously, we don't have preliminary drawings yet, but we will be taking those matters into consideration for sure.
Councillor Knox?
Yeah, just on that, things like parking, for instance, all of these type of buildings have these rules and regulations and bylaws, so they would have to come, if there was a change in what the requirements for parking were, they'd come back to this table. So this is just the very preliminary start of this, saying that it could be rezoned to this, so lots to go.
No, none of that can happen until the rezoning happens. So this is just for the rezoning tonight, not for permits for buildings or anything like that at this time. Further questions from council?
If I may, Your Worship, so we were just taking an opportunity to review where this was on the agenda and how it was advertised to the community. So there was a failure in communication between us and the planning department about this being sent as a public hearing, and this was put as a bylaw reading to change the rezoning. So since, although appropriate notice was sent out, we did not hold this discussion as a hearing as per our bylaws. So I would recommend we stop these proceedings tonight, re-advertise a public hearing at a future council meeting to appropriately make sure we're following legislatively the process we should. So my apologies to the residents that came out this evening. It was properly advertised, however, it wasn't properly communicated between planning and city administration. So that being said, my recommendation is that council does not move forward and have the second and third readings on this bylaw, and that we hold a public hearing in the future with due notice to the public, and so we can go through our procedure through the proper way.
Okay. So with all the notice that's to be given, what would be the approximate, what's the time requirement so we can give people an idea of roughly when it might be heard?
I would defer that question to Ms. Anderson.
I will need 2 weeks in order to advertise. So probably there's only one council meeting in November. It could go for the November meeting, as we'll send this out tomorrow.
Okay. Councillor Knox?
Just so I'm clear, what you're saying is it's going to be re-advertised. Homeowners with 100-meter radius will receive something in the mail. So almost starting the process over again is what we're saying.
And conducted as a public hearing.
Yeah, and then conducted as a public hearing where homeowners can come and speak to in favor or object to it. So
Through your worship to Councillor Knox, that is my understanding. Ms. Anderson, anything to add?
That is correct.
Okay. Again, Your Worship, my apologies on behalf of administration for the confusion on this, and to the residents who came out this evening. We'll make sure they get due notice, and we will conduct it as a proper public hearing so they can ask questions, and we also, PCRC will be able to come as a proponent and give more information on the project.
Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and not to certainly belabor it, but I'm just curious now about the first reading that we did have. Can somebody explain maybe how the first reading works in that aspect now that has already been passed, and how it relates to our guests and the opportunity for them to come and either learn, object, or agree to whatever it may be that they have?
Yeah, so the first reading was carried at the August 8th meeting, and that is a valid reading. And then it goes forward and has the opportunity to have a public hearing, and then we'd move on to the second and third reading. The confusion within administration was that there's a number of files here, and although the advertisement for a public hearing was put out, we moved forward as the thought that the public hearing had occurred, and we were going into second and third reading. So that was a mistake by administration. I do apologize to the residents that came out this evening.
Sir, thank you for the clarification. And just in addition to that, so you're saying that at the first reading there would have not been a public hearing available?
The public hearing would occur after the first reading. You put it on the table essentially as a first reading, and then you have an opportunity for the public to understand what's happening through the public hearing process, and council gets due feedback, and then after that they can move on to the second and third reading of the motion, or this in the case rezoning.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification. It was more for the audience. So now that I've read the motion, or no, we haven't read the motion yet, have we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would.
Have I read the motion?
I would ask you not to read the motion. Sorry, let me just grab this report. So the motion's asking for us to move it a second and third time. The report has been read, but there's no need to act.
I did read, sorry, in all due respect, I did read the motion already.
Was there a mover and seconder on the file?
Yes, there was.
There was? Okay, so then I would ask, and was there a call on that vote?
No.
Okay, so I would ask a member of council to put a motion to defer and to our, Ms. Anderson, could you, confirm how much notice is required under the Act?
2 weeks.
Would that be before?
So November.
November.
So then,
So the motion would
So
be
then-
to defer to the November meeting of council?
so I make a motion and move that the council of the city of Portage la Prairie defer this second reading and third reading. Just the second reading. The second reading to the November 14th council meeting.
That's correct. And I'm assuming you're moving that motion.
I'm moving that, yes, and I so move. Yep.
Moved by Councillor Meyer and seconded by Councillor Knox. Any questions or comments on this motion?
Can you just please read that back for clarification? Oh, I am sorry. Okay. I think.
That the council of the city of Portage la Prairie defer this matter to the November 14th meeting of council. The second reading, we'll say, instead of this matter.
Second reading. Okay. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Any,
Was that second? I believe we still need a seconder.
I seconded it.
Councillor Knox is our seconder. Any further questions or comments on the motion? Okay, question's been called. All those in favor of the motion? And that is carried.
Thank you for the clarification.
So that concludes our business for council this evening. Council is adjourned at 7:16 p.m. We're going to move right into committee, and I'd just like to let everybody know, committee is open to the public. Committee is also open to the press. Normally they're here. I wonder if I got a virus from. Here we go. Okay, committee is called to order at 7:16 p.m. First up is Finance Committee, which is Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee has nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. And City Planning and Economic Development, Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The City Planning and Economic Development Committee has nothing in committee tonight.
Thank you. And Community Service Committee, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Community Service Committee has nothing to report in Committee of the Whole tonight.
Thank you. And Waterworks Committee, Councillor Knox again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing from your Waterworks Committee this evening.
Thank you. And Transportation Committee, Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. And the Transportation Committee as well has nothing in committee meeting tonight.
And finally, Public Safety Committee, Councillor Knox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing from your Public Safety Committee this evening.
Thank you. So committee is adjourned at 7:17 p.m. Thank you for coming out, everybody, and thank you for being patient this evening with us.